Hello and welcome back to Animated Banners with CSS. For the last part of our animation, we're going to animate this evergreen tree and we're going to swap it in and out with a snowman graphic. Now if you remember, the snowman and the Christmas tree are part of the same graphic. They're in the same image, but we can't see the snowman right now because he's hovering somewhere up above the browser right now. All we're seeing, the only part of this image we're seeing is the evergreen tree. So if we go into our code, and I should point out that we're now in the Banner 14 folder, so all the changes we make in this lesson will be saved there. But if we go to our code, we can see our foreground image here, and we gave it a class of img01. So if we go to banner.css, we can find that class here, img01, and we see the bottom position is set to 0. So the bottom of that image is aligned with the bottom edge of our banner. Now, if we give that bottom edge a negative value, for instance, if we give it negative 300, which if you remember is the height of the browser itself, that will move the tree down. Let's save it and jump back into our browser and refresh. That will move the tree down to the point where we can't see anything in that area on the banner, which is good because this is going to be the initial position before the tree animates up and onto the banner. But at some point, we're going to have to animate it down even further so that the snowman, which is still too far up here to be able to see, will come down and come into view. And if we bring it down to a value of negative 700 and save our file and refresh our page, that will bring that image down far enough so that the top of the snowman is even with the top of the banner. And if we scroll down, we can see the bottom of the image where the tree is down here. So again, the tree and the snowman, that's all part of one image. And those are the values we need to consider when we're animating this. So we need it to start off at a value of negative 300. Save that and refresh. That way there's nothing on the stage initially. And then when everything's animating in at the beginning, we want the tree to animate in with it. So we're going to animate from a value of negative 300 to a value of 0. And then once the looping animation starts, we'll go back and forth from 0 to negative 700. So let's start with our initial animation. We'll go to animations.css and we'll grab our paragraphs and nudge them down, and we'll create a new section for our image animation. So we'll just put image here. And there we go. So then we'll create an animation for @-webkit -keyframes space, and then we'll just call this one image-loop. And that's not actually the one we're creating. First, we're going to create the initial animation where it comes on. So we'll leave image loop there, and we'll create another keyframe animation above it for image-on. This is where we'll initially animate it on, and we're just going to have a 0% keyframe here and a 100% keyframe because we're just animating it again from a bottom value of negative 300 pixels, and at negative 300 pixels we can't see anything of that image, to a bottom value here of 0 pixels. So that will animate it up so that the bottom of the tree is even with the bottom of the banner. So let's save that, go back to banner.css, and for image01, we'll create our animation, -webkit -animation. We're going to point to that animation, which is called, I've already forgotten, it's called image on. So image-on, it's going to last 1 second. And I'm going to put forwards here so that once it gets to the end of that animation, it will stay there. It won't jump back to its initial position. So that should take care of that. Let's go ahead and save our file, jump into our browser, and refresh. And sure enough, at the very beginning of the animation, the evergreen tree animates on, and we can refresh our browser to see that again, and that looks pretty good. So now that that's done, let's take a look at our chart. So for our snowman animation and our tree animation, it's pretty easy. We have 5-second delay, a 1-second animation, another 5-second delay, and another 1-second animation. So we only have a few keyframes to make here at 0, 42, 50, 92, and 100. So let's go back to our CSS file, and we'll go to animations.css, and we'll create those keyframes here. So as always, we have 0%, and then we'll have, I think it was 42%. Yeah, 42, then 50, 42%, 50%, 92%, and then 100%. So let's get rid of this here, and I'm going to type bottom colon space semicolon. So let's grab this entire thing here, copy it, and we'll just paste it over and over again. And then we'll enter in our values. So initially, it's the bottom value here is going to be 0 because that's where it ended up after the initial animation. So it's going to stay at 0 for the first 5 seconds. So 0 pixels. And then at 42%, it's still going to be at 0 pixels. But from 42 to 50, over the course of that second, it's going to animate up to, if you remember, negative 700 pixels. Then it will stay at negative 700 for the next 5 seconds. So we'll enter negative 700 for 92% as well. And then for this last 8% here, it will animate back to 0 pixels. So we'll save that, jump back to banner.css, and add that second animation to our first animation here. So after forwards, we'll type comma space, and we'll point to image hyphen loop, which is the second animation we just created. It's going to occur over the duration of 12 seconds. We use the ease function. We want a 1 second delay before this starts, and then we want it to loop infinitely. So we'll use the infinite keyword there. So let's save that, jump back into our browser, and refresh our page. So our tree animates on, and hopefully when our first set of text animates off, the tree will change to a snowman, and sure enough, that's what happens. So then, when the rest of our text animates off, we should get back to the tree animation, and we do. So this should go back and forth infinitely, and you'll probably want to watch it a few times just to make sure that these animations don't get off, that the timing stays consistent, but that looks pretty good. So the last thing I want to do, now that we've got all of our animations finished here, is I want to block off all of this extra content that's appearing outside of the banner area. Obviously, we don't want to be able to see that. I liked seeing it initially because it gave us a good idea of what our animation is doing, but now that we're done, we don't really want it there. And in fact, let me show you one thing really quickly that I didn't show you before. If we jump back into our code, I'm going to create a rule for the body of our document and just set the background color to a medium gray color, so #999, and this is just temporary so I can show you something. We'll save that, jump back to our browser and refresh, and we can see what's happening with our snow. So our snow image is animating down, and we can see when it's looping. When it gets to the point where all of the flakes at the beginning disappear, they're not really disappearing, they're just jumping back up to the starting position. And we can see it happening with the smaller background snow as well. It just takes 5 seconds for that animation to happen, as opposed to the 1 second that it takes for the snowflakes in front to happen. So that's something I never showed you before. We just saw a bunch of white space down here before. We didn't know that all of this snow was still going on down there, but it is. And now that we have that gray background on it, we can see it. But now we want to get rid of all of that exterior graphics. We want to get rid of the text and the images that are appearing outside of the banner, and it's very easy to do. It just takes one line of CSS. We'll just come up to our banner and we'll give it an overflow property of hidden. So once we do that, we'll save our file, refresh our browser, and now we can see only what's inside the browser itself. Everything else has been cut off, it's been hidden, it's all invisible. And now we have a really nice looking animated browser. So let's, banner, excuse me. So let's jump back to our page, and I'm gonna get rid of this background color here. We'll just change that back to white, save it, refresh, and there we go. So there's one last thing I want to do for this banner that we'll get to in the next video, and that is I want to make this banner clickable. Because right now we have this big call to action that says click here to learn more, but right now we really don't have anything to click on. So again, we'll get to that in the next video. Thank you for watching.